Darren is a Minnesota native, and he's worked for the city of Dubuque as a civil engineer.
Iowa invasive.
Iowa invasive species right here since
98.
So I think even when Darren was in his mother's womb, he was thinking about how to stop flooding downtown Dubuque. That's all I've seen him ever work on, but he was instrumental in getting our MS4 permit off the ground, and has been a mentor to me as I took that over, which I could never repay him for. So it's my great honor to introduce him to you, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. It's really fascinating.
Thanks, Dean. So as Dean said, I grew up in Minnesota, and when I moved to Iowa, Minnesota, where I lived, is kind of the heartland with St. Cloud, Minnesota. So it's on the river, but it's flat. So nothing drains there. And now I moved to Dubuque, Iowa, and everything drains here because we're in the driftless area, which I had no idea what it meant, until I moved to Iowa and figured out why is Dubuque so different. It's obviously on the river, but there are other things that make it so different. So talking about Lee Branch Watershed, and just where Dubuque is, if you don't know, the smiley face where we're at today. So we're basically right on the confluence on the Mississippi, right at where Illinois and Iowa and Wisconsin all come together. In Dubuque, we always want to make sure, we always talk in terms of where we are and other geographical references, so Mississippi Watershed, so we're very aware that what we do in Dubuque impacts other communities up and down the river. And of course, this scene, as most of you have seen and are familiar with, up and down. I took 35 up this morning and saw even more impressive views than this. I hated to admit, but anyway, just to show you the character of Dubuque. So we do have these bluffs, we do have these steep terrain from this driftless area. We do have a history of flooding related to the river, as a lot of communities do. We did build a flood wall around 1970, and so that has protected us from the river for many of these years. But what it has done is then also created a barrier between the river and the city. So now when the waters rush off the bluffs and the slopes, now it has to somehow get through that barrier, and it's complicated our drainage system a little bit. So just our city limits are shown in red there. The green is the Bee Branch Watershed. So one of the things that's unique about it, it's all within our jurisdictional boundary. It's about 7 square miles. So it gives us a unique opportunity to affect change throughout the whole watershed, maybe serve as a model as to what other people can do when you have to go outside your jurisdiction. I mean, because obviously watersheds go outside of counties, even outside of states in some situations. And so we're afforded this opportunity to see what we can do for the watershed to address many issues besides flooding. But you can also see this shows kind of the topography of the area. And so you've got the steeper bluffs and steeper terrain on the west, and the flow typically goes towards the river. Just zooming in here, northeast part of the city. And generally speaking, the water flows, as the arrows indicate here, from the steep bluffs into this flatter area. We had done a study in about 2001 to kind of look at the flooding in the area, and this just identified an area of the city that about 1,100 or 1,200 properties are at risk of flood damage. This just shows what that looks like on the map. So, and then in 2009, as part of the mapping that FEMA does for flood rate insurance maps, they had done their own study, and this is the kind of the flood area they had predicted. This was about 1,400 properties that impacted. This flood-prone area is actually called the Cooler Valley. And as I was reading a poster out there, and now I know where the word coulee comes from French, from flows, something like that. So, to flow, there you go, thanks, Dean. So ironically, this area doesn't flow anymore. And so it just gives an indication of the flooding that we see. So this is like 1 in the morning. I don't know what kids are out wandering in the streets, but that's so part of the danger and part of the why we need to address this issue.
I guess compared to many other Iowa communities is that being on the Mississippi River, we have
My less gray hair there.
And there's steep terrain, and then that drains to flat terrain right next to our river, the Mississippi River. And so the water comes very fast. The stormwater that does flow off the property comes very fast off of those steep grades and then slopes way down and collects at these lower areas. And that's where we have our problems right now, or a major portion of our problems.
You can probably hear
6:13 now, we have had a very good.
So what you were seeing there was the water rushing down, and of course we put our streets at the very low spot of these ravines that go up through the city, and so the water goes down there and rushes off. And so that's what you're seeing, it rush from the steep areas into the flatter areas. So over a course of 12 years, we had 6 presidential disasters due to heavy rains and the flooding that resulted. And then, generally speaking, they've been getting worse. We thought we had the real big storm in 2010 when we had like 12 inches or we had like 6 inches in 12 hours, and then in 2011 we had 12 inches in 12 hours. Just statistically speaking, these had a lot of what were previously thought of as rare events. So if you compare like in the 1992 Atlas for rainfall frequency analysis that was done by Huff and Engel to the new data or new analysis done by NOAA recently, and compare the two, where NOAA is basically incorporating the rainfall since 1992 in their analysis, just wanted to point out that basically what used to be where we could expect once every 100 years or had a 1% chance of occurring, that's now doubled, so we can expect it twice as often, and generally about a 20% increase in actual amount of rainfall for these big events. So we're estimated $70 million in damage. So that's basically kind of why we kind of are looking into this in watershed management. A lot of it was driven by flooding. And so we looked at our study again, and we came up with a 12-phase approach to address this. And it's important how we're addressing them that I guess really has the benefits to the community. And the main reason why we're able to take on a project that's a $180 million price tag. Our Dubuque has about 60,000 residents. We don't have industry is nothing out of the ordinary, so there's nothing that makes us remarkable in terms of size or industry that why we can be able to take on a project this magnitude in another community of a similar size. But I think it's because of how we've done it that we've been able to grow partnerships and get outside funding sources to help make this change. So combined, these projects will probably save about $600 million in damage over the life of these projects. But basically, we're trying to address the flooding in multiple ways, and this is where we're going to be able to go up in the watershed. So first, we're looking at the volume, decrease the amount of pervious pavements. So we'll go over that a little bit. We're also looking at rate and timing, so that it doesn't all get down to the flood-prone area at the same time. And then once it does get down there, conveyance. So I mean, I'm sure most of you have seen those images of when through urbanization, more water rushes off, it all rushes off faster and combines quicker, and then the downstream facilities can't handle all that flow. So we're trying to reverse some of that through these various phases of our project. So volume, one of the things that we're doing is converting all 240 alleys in the watershed into pervious pavement systems. And so basically we're taking things like the hard packed gravel areas where water does pond a little bit, but generally rushes off to downstream streets, which then continues and contributes flow downstream, and instead into a pervious pavement where the water will go into the ground. And one of the things about that the city has is it's not just converting the impervious area to pervious. The benefit goes beyond that, because if you remember and you realize that all these private properties, where do they shed their water? They shed it to our property, the city property, these alleys. So it's really more than just preventing water from running off. It's giving a place for all the contributing impervious areas that might be adjacent for that also to capture that flow. One of the other challenges we've had that in terms of this is, again, as we get up into the watershed, we've got steeper slopes, and we are still going to build these pervious pavement systems on these steeper slopes. And if you look at most design manuals for pervious pavement, they say, you know, 2% or 3, less than 5% as a general guideline, that you don't want to go above that, and there are very good reasons for that. And most of those guidelines are, if you want to make sure it's successful, this is the way you do it, and these would be the ideal places. But we're actually going to be doing them in steeper areas, and we just have to make sure that we handle, once the water gets in the ground, that it just doesn't flow under the pavers and then blow out at the bottom of the hill. So we just have to design that in our system. That's what we call a pervious pavement system. I guess the other thing we did, I should point out, is an older area of our town, historic millwork district. It's part of a public-private partnership to revitalize this area. And we redid the streets in that area with pervious pavement systems as well, where the main streets themselves, or the drivable areas, are impervious, you know, like you would see regularly. But on the side and the parking areas, we incorporated the pervious pavement, so that, again, so in some of our street systems, we're starting to do that as well. You have a question? Sure.
I just wanted to interject real quick while you're
Yeah.
on this topic. What have you seen for water quality? I know you're trying to deal with stormwater quantity. What are you seeing for quality using those? And then do you have problems with snow plowing over these? Are your snow plows, you know, kicking up the pavers? Or
So maybe Dean can help me out a little bit, but I know we also allowed a subdivision, a new subdivision, to put in pervious pavement streets. And I think they were, the DNR was doing some testing on those. I don't know if you've heard what they're finding. I know there's very little runoff.
I'm there every 3 months, and I haven't seen a bit of problems with that street cul-de-sac.
As far as water quality, have you heard any?
No, I know John has got some sensors in some of our alleys to start to get data on what we're reducing as far as pollutant loads, but I don't think we've received any of that data yet. It's collecting at this point.
Yeah, I should say, we just started, we did some pilots maybe 5 years ago. We just really started last year, this massive undertaking. So we've got about 30 done and about 40 under contract, and we're going to do about 50 more next year. And then we're doing the alleys kind of over a 20-year period, depending on available funding. But that's one of the things we're doing, is putting in monitoring stations, so we don't have the hard data yet. As far as plowing, like Dean said, there's been no issues there. My kid has a paper out in that neighborhood, and so I've been out there just last week, and they're doing fine in the winter.
I get a lot of feedback about that issue, so it'd be good to have some firsthand counter arguments.
Right.
So maybe I'll get you those things.
And our alleys
Sure.
are not maintained by Public Works, so they're not plowed.
But these streets are, so.
The streets are, but the alleys are not. So all these green alleys don't have the snow plows going over them. But the great thing about the green alleys is the porous space underneath it all helps to warm that up, and you'll see the snow melt a lot faster in those green alleys than the typical surface.
The other issue is, because and you probably know this, but it's not just, taking off the grading and slapping down the bricks with the whole porous, in between them. It's doing the system underneath, and so that when you get down to frost or below frost, then you have a lot less of any movement of these. You won't have the movement, the differential settlement that could cause a brick to be up a little bit and maybe catch on a snow plow. So that's part of the reason why it works that way. But that's definitely been a concern in a cold weather climate. So rate and timing, this is just detention basins. Most people are familiar with detention basins. A couple of neat things though about what we were able to do is, so this is actually on the Bee Branch Creek, on the kind of maybe towards the headwaters of it, is there's this wooded ravine area. So in order for us to create a detention basin, we were able to just build an embankment, as you see here, just added fill to basically impound water when it rains behind the embankment. And so, like I said, when it rains, the water will collect in this wooded area. But as it sits today, it's just a wooded area. So we've, in essence, preserved 12 acres of wooded area, of wooded habitat, because we had to acquire the property, acquire the easements. So we basically established this preserve. I mean, it's on a very small scale, but again, something that could scale up. West 32nd Street Detention Basin. This was an existing detention basin that basically was like a shown on the left here, it was just basically dug out in about 1950. Not really much design other than just, hey, we need to hold some water and help downstream. And so when we redid this, we basically tripled the footprint and doubled the capacity of it. We also looked at what are the other secondary uses of this property, because a lot of people make a soccer complex. When it's not raining, what are you going to use that property for? Hey, we'll play soccer there. But our community actually brought this natural area back into the community. So it's right almost near the heart of downtown, and people can go there and see natural community, see deer walking through there or other things. So we basically embrace this natural area, and this was actually designed by MSA and Applied Ecological Services, who kind of laid out this, again, this native plantings, prairies. We hope to do our first burn. We tried to do it last year, but weather and bureaucracy wouldn't allow, so hopefully this year we'll get it going. And then, of course, downstream, once we try to reduce the volume and we try to hold back water and affect the timing, now it's about, okay, now the areas that do get the water, how do we make sure the water safely moves through that area? And so conveyance, so we do have some storm sewer projects in the cooler valley area to make it cooly again. So if water does get there, it can quickly drain away. But probably the most noteworthy one is our Bee Branch Creek restoration, where around 1874, this is an image that just shows this creek that went through this area. So one time it was a coulee area. And so it flowed from the north to the south. And then around 1910, they had completed burying this storm sewer and developing over the top of it. And so this kind of just shows a picture of the outlet where it would outlet, and the Mississippi River is about right in this area here. And so our project is to daylight about 4,500 feet of that storm sewer. As is shown, this is about, size-wise, about 20 feet across here, maybe 10 feet high. And of course, it gradually gets smaller as you go upstream. And again, one of the reasons why why we only stop daylighting here is because the upstream detention takes care of flow and makes the sewer from here to here be able to handle that large flow. But then we have water coming in from these other areas where we need that additional capacity. We've broken it up to talk about it just for funding and construction, in lower and upper. Lower just means downstream, basically, upper upstream. And so we actually were able to construct the lower Bee Branch and completed that in about the fall of 2010. But basically what that involved was dredging out of this ponding area that functions in conjunction with the levee system, excavating out this new creek. We're actually able to work with the Corps of Engineers to place the soil, keep it on site so we're not trucking it off to who knows where, because normally that's what a contractor will do. And then had a couple bridges there to maintain traffic. And so that's what it was looked like. And then the basin itself, again, there's a levee kind of shown there. And so one of the things we did, we kind of revamped that as we did it as well. Basically, this is what it looked like before. It captured a lot of sediment over the years. And so it kind of became a cesspool, and nobody really, it's lined with trees, so nobody ever looked at it. And this is kind of what it looks like after. I'll just show a quick video here. It's like 90 seconds to show. So this is just a day in the spring of 2013, showing various waterfowl that scenes I'm sure people up and down the Mississippi and LaCrosse see all the time with all your, I've noticed a lot of water bodies around LaCrosse with So these videos are actually produced by our city television station. It's just a two-man crew. They just go out and shoot video, and so that's kind of what the basin looks like. So, of course, we are right on the, the migratory area for the McKenzie Valley, Great Lakes, Mississippi. I learned something yesterday when I was kind of updating this presentation. But over the years in this basin, even the way it was before, Charlie Winterwood, I saw him earlier today. I don't know if you ran into talk to Charlie. Him and his group had actually witnessed or spotted 45 different bird species just in this basin over the years. So obviously provides much more benefit than flood control, to the community. Just some quick show, replace a sea of asphalt with this creek. Again, this is the storm sewer outlet you saw before.
This is all where the pack plant was, right?
Yes. So for example, this right here would be looking from 16th Street or to the north at what the former pack site. So there's another little 45-second clip of, again, maybe what people have. So we've had, eagle's nest obviously along the Mississippi River at various points, but I think this was last winter about this time. These eagles are flying basically over that daylighted creek. And so that's the image that you saw before, looking north on 16th Street. Again, all the different various migratory birds. We had a really, when we were looking for funding and how we were going to fund some of this stuff, we went to the state, because they have the state revolving loan fund. It's from the EPA and it's for water quality. And the one conversation was, because this buried storm sewer is not a water of the United States, it's just a storm sewer. And so, but when we create this, we're basically creating a water of the United States. And so the one guy goes, is it a problem if we create a water of the United States that's impaired? Because most urban streams are impaired for, some form or another. So, so the DNR had actually helped us do a fish study and found 15 species from 7 different families just after just 3 years of it being there. So, real excited about that. And then as we go to phase 2, that's going to move into construction. We're just putting the construction documents together, hopefully for bidding this March. That'll take a couple of years to build. So just to show what this looks like. One of the differences you'll notice now, we're transitioning more into a neighborhood or residential area, and so you see much more green. So now we're going to have more of a smaller creek with still 18 to 24 inches of water in there, and then basically a floodplain area, so when it does rain, that can fill up and the water can move through the area. So this kind of looks flat, but obviously the top of the embankment will be on the sides here, and then it'll slope down at a 4 to 5 to 1, some retaining walls in order to maximize that. I'll just give you some of the different, so just the cross section again. So one of the things we did is, we always try to take input from funding agencies, from permitting agencies along the way, obviously to see how their missions match with ours. And so they pointed out some things we can do with our design, some really simple things to promote, a habitat for fish. So we don't know if fish are going to thrive in this environment or not, but with just some pretty inexpensive things we can do in our design and construct, we're hopeful that fish will take hold in here, and that you can actually, hold fishing derbies in the middle of town in some of these residential areas. Question?
Yeah, on that, this upper B branch, which I believe you said extended into a residential area. Are you all doing anything to encourage residences to approach zero runoff on their own property, or installing mitigation efforts on streets or in other ways to slow down runoff?
So a couple things. He asked about what are we doing with residents, how they might help or assist or be a partner in this. And so a couple of things. We do have some cost share programs for property owners if they want to put in a rain garden or use a rain barrel to kind of reduce their water footprint, if you will. So we do have that. One of the issues in these neighborhoods is because of the topography, I feel like I'm talking to people who know this, but our houses are really close together. So the lots are really small, so there's kind of a limited what they can do, but in some cases where they can, we definitely partner with them. We've actually hired a full-time communication outreach person to work with residents, not only during construction, because it's going to have some drastic impacts during the 2 years it's under construction, and 70 alleys in these neighborhoods under construction, so there's a lot of citizens impacted. So we have this person to deal with them on a daily basis, but also we're doing a construction safety outreach. We're also going to expand that into living near a creek, because obviously as a civil engineer, public safety is our number one concern, and obviously the residents are concerned with that. And so, it's one thing to live on the river, and I've been walking down the river when it's flood stage and that water's whipping by, and I remember thinking to myself, if I just slipped and fell and rolled down there, I'd be gone, But this is in the neighborhoods, and even though it's not going to move anywhere near that, it's going to move like 5 miles an hour even at flood stage, but it's going to be in their neighborhoods. It's something new, and it's obviously respect nature is a pretty big component. So we're going to have to go out to the public and make sure they're aware of that, work with the schools as well. So another way to partner with citizens to make sure that the community is safe.
Darren, you should mention the treatment facilities we're looking at for catching as far as...
Yeah. So one of the things we're adding is these baffle boxes. We're doing this as a public amenity, and I'll show you some of the images in a second. But so we're trying to keep trash out. One of the things we did when we finished the lower B branch, where the existing sewer still remains, we put these trash grates, and they basically caught everything. And that was a real pain in the butt. I mean, it was nice, but they clog up really easy. And what happens is, you'll have this rain and you get this first flush. So we experience it firsthand, where all these leaves come down and plug it up, and then of course it backs up and overflows and rips things apart. And so we clean it, and then if you get these rains afterwards, it's not a big deal. But then you don't have a rain for 3 weeks, and now that area, all that is accumulating in the watershed, and then you get that big flush. So we learned there's an awful lot of debris and floatables coming down. And so we have these baffle boxes so that anywhere where water is going to empty into this creek, we're going to have it go through this system where sediment can drop out and floatables can be captured. The systems, there's a couple of systems out there. The Sun Tree system is the one we're going with, but there's also one out in California we learned too. That's basically a vault that basically goes right in line and the water flows through and it captures that. So that'll be, because we have this amenities that we're creating here. Again, in order to be able to actually build this, we could not build this concrete line channel just to get water through. It would not be acceptable to the community at all, and so they wouldn't want to fund any part of it, nor could we have gotten funding from the EPA, DNR. And so again, it's important how we do it. This is an example. So a lot of our areas we planted with this, some people call it no-mow fescue. We can't say that because people think we're not going to maintain things, so we call it low-mow fescue. But it basically, once it gets to a certain height, it just flops over. And so really much reduced maintenance needs. It's much more hardy as far as drought or wet conditions, so it doesn't need fertilizer like a turf grass would. And again, some prairie grasses where that makes sense as well. Just to give you some of the images of what it's going to look like. So this is going to be, I didn't really show it, but we have to go through a railroad yard, and this would just be the upstream end of the railroad yard. And so we're actually going to be tunneling pipes under the railroad. And that's one of the things that kind of delayed our project a little bit, is trying to make it so that our impacts of our construction doesn't, as they would argue, impact commerce across the country. So, But this is just upstream again, and so you're going to see a lot of trees. You know, it's a man-made creek, but we're trying, you know, to make it look and feel like a natural creek. So this is just kind of looking upstream. This would be just up a block. So a couple things here. We've got an outdoor amphitheater, which is adjacent to an elementary school. So it's kind of an outdoor classroom. We have the trail system here. We're actually connecting a 26-mile hike-bike trail that extends to Dyersville and the Field of Dreams. So that connects to the city right now, but there's like a 3-block or 4-block, basically where it ends right in the middle of our project, and we're going to extend that down to the river, so now we have trail systems can hook up. And so we were able to get funding, for example, for that piece through National Scenic Byways and the Department of Transportation, just for these other alternative transportation methods. This is going to be a prairie biofield area, again for localized flooding. This is going to be a community orchard where we're going to plant different types of orchard trees, I guess, so for the community to use. This is just looking farther upstream. Again, trailhead parking with pervious pavement. We've got so this is the trail. Right now this goes 26 miles to the north to Dyersville. So people coming into this area, you know, can continue on, but now we've given some other diversions, so we're going to have some embankment slides where taking advantage of the slope where they have a slide, they slide down to the bottom of the slope, walk up the hill, and again, give different things for people to do who might be tired of biking. And then this is at 24th Street. We have a very large neighborhood park there, and so we're making a kind of this unique, compelling connection where people are going to all come together, whether you're utilizing this new greenway, or whether you're riding from Dyersville, or if you're just in the neighborhood park. All these things come together. So there's bathroom facilities, et cetera, over there.
Is that Comiskey?
Yeah, that's Comiskey Park, yeah. So again, just highlighting the watershed nature of the project, that we're looking at it. You know, there's no alleys over here, so that's why there's no blue over there for redoing alleys. But like I said, we are looking at pervious pavement streets now, so that will be the next thing. Project partners could not make this happen without project partners seeking input at all levels. And basically, again, it's important how we do it. You know, for example, one of the grants that we have on here, where'd it go? Vision Iowa. So that's a thing for tourism and community attraction. So they're helping fund some of the amenities. So even though it's a flood control project, again, it's what makes it possible is the other benefits that it provides and bundling those benefits. And with that, I'm done with the presentation. Is there any other follow-up questions? Sure.
You guys applied for any awards, recognition for this yet? I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we've looking to do some of that stuff. Part of the struggle is we're not all the way done, and we have part of it done. But that's definitely one of the things that we do as a city. We do try to draw attention to ourselves, not because we think we're so great, but businesses. You know, doing things like this really matter to businesses, and for a community's viability, you need businesses and jobs. So it's really for that reason that we try to do just that. And so that definitely will be part of what we do next. Sure.
Before this started, obviously there's no lot of prep work and everything. What kind of reaching out to the public did you do in order to get permission to spend some money dollars?
Great question. So we've had public input at various stages. At the very beginning, we had this big flood in 1999 where all these people were flooded. And so the engineers went back and designed this system, and they said, hey, if you build this creek here and we're going to solve the problem, and yeah, we're going to have to buy like 100 houses. And people were like, what? You guys no, that's ridiculous. All you need to do is keep the sewer clean and we'll be fine. And so that kind of blew up. We actually had to step back and thought about restudying it, get a second opinion. So we learned the hard way, basically. So what we did next was we had a citizen advisory committee that actually helped or recommended an alignment as to how this would wind its way through the community. So that was important. So they basically decided what houses we'd have to buy and acquire and what people would have to move. And how they did that is they actually established the criteria that would dictate what's a good alignment. So like their number one criteria is preserve neighborhood services, like don't demolish the only grocery store in our neighborhood, things like that. And then of course the number two was, houses, minimize the acquisition of houses. Then when we had our design team come on board, we had public input sessions where we asked them, do you like the look of this bridge? Do you not like the look of this bridge? Or what do you like about this? What are your hopes and fears? And then we had a series of those meetings so we could incorporate what they liked and what they didn't like in there. So for example, those bridges, that they kind of liked the look of that bridge, and that's why we're able to, spend a little extra money to make that bridge, because here the public had endorsed it. So we continue public engagement all along because, yeah, you're right. We created a stormwater utility, and we also had a citizen advisory committee there to discuss how that should be formulated and what it should look like and how we can fund this. So a lot of involvement. How much time do I have left? How am I doing? How many?
3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Sure, way in the back.
I was curious about the source of funding for your cost share program for residential folks, for rain gardens and.
So we basically use stormwater utility funding for that. So we just have a stormwater utility, we collect money, and so we just set aside a certain amount each year in our capital improvement program budget for that activity. And I guess the way we look at it, because obviously as a community and as a public organization, we have to be very careful about spending public money on private property. So the way we look at it is there's a mutual benefit. So if they are improving or putting in a rain garden, we do get a benefit from it. And so that's how we're able to do that. But that's how we're getting the money for that. So.
In Cedar Rapids this past summer, we had one neighborhood that was particularly hard hit by flash flooding, and the city found itself unable to assist those residents in any meaningful way. And discussion is going on about whether to set aside some of the funds that are generated by our stormwater utility as a kind of self-insurance, so that when neighborhoods do get devastated in isolated instances, and there's no opportunity for a state of emergency to be declared by the governor or anybody else, that the city would have the capability of responding to these citizens. Is that something that you all are considering or have considered?
No, I hadn't heard of that. That's an interesting concept. I do know that we currently have the second highest utility in the state of Iowa, so we're kind of, they're stretched quite a bit right now. They're paying quite a bit, so, and that's just to kind of implement a lot of these changes and all the other stormwater issues we have throughout the city, because obviously we have more than just this, just upkeep of our stormwater system. So, but we'll have to look into that because that sounds interesting, because that Cooler Valley area, about half of it is in the floodplain now and half of it isn't, just because of the way things work out. And so some people would have flood insurance or would be forced to have it, and others wouldn't have it. But of course that only protects you from the structure itself. So if you live there, which a lot of these people are just tenants, they might have their memorabilia in the basement or their whatever they store in their basement, and every time it gets flooded it gets ruined, they lose it. So it doesn't really help them. So that would be an interesting concept, because one of the issues that we had in 1999 is these people had no idea they were in harm's way when it came to flooding. So that was a big challenge. Well, thank you for